Thanks, ladies, for joining us and having a bit of a chat about your experience with the Performance by Design system. Fee, I'll ask you first. We started working with you in the exec team. What was that experience like for you initially before we actually got into the Queensland team with Sam?
It was, even though we'd worked together as a team for a long time, and there are quite a few members of the team that I've known for a long time, it was pretty challenging to. I found it personally challenging and rewarding all at the same time. And I was amazed at how quickly we could have genuine conversations by just stopping and listening to each other.
Yeah, very good. So that dovetails pretty quickly into moving on to the Queensland team. So, Sam, where were you at as a team and a leader before we started working with you guys up there in Queensland?
As a team, I think we were pretty inconsistent and average in our performance, and I think we were just trying to do our best every day. Like, I think we're trying to do our best, but we just weren't hitting the mark.
Yeah.
And I don't think we were probably as connected as we are now. Like, not saying that we weren't in communication with each other, but I just don't think the level of trust in our connection was there that it is there now.
Yeah.
And for myself, I have been in this role for some time. So I had experienced periods of higher performance, and I had a relatively big shuffle in my team. So for me, I felt like I was probably lost is not exactly the right word, but I just, whatever I was doing before wasn't working for me right now. And so my confidence declined with that.
All right. With that confidence dropping a bit, what behaviours did you fall upon as a result?
I wasn't very trusting. Okay. I thought I could do everything myself, and I was probably very protective of everybody around me because there'd been so much change and I didn't want any more change.
I see. That's interesting. Cool. So then when the opportunity arose for us and working with Performance by Design, did you choose to work with us, or Fee, was it your recommendation? How did it actually play out?
That was Fiona's recommendation.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
And what was your initial reaction, Sam?
I was definitely open to it. I thought, great. I'm not closed off to learning new things. Didn't know what I was getting into though. I'll be really honest. I had a bit of a look at the website, and I'd heard a few bits and pieces from Fiona, but probably didn't understand what it would do until I was fully embedded.
Yeah.
So I was apprehensive, I won't lie. When I came on that first day, I was like, I don't know what this is going to be about. And yeah, a bit of anxiety was in there without a doubt.
Yeah. And how did you approach that first day together? Fee, what was your thoughts approaching that day? I think it was February 14th, I believe. I think it was Valentine's Day.
I can't remember. I couldn't remember if it was March or February.
It was February.
Obviously, I had previously done some work with you, Emile, and it was really only 2 days. And then Emile and Sam had some phone contact because Emile was still here. And then we'd met and had a coffee and had a chat about what we thought some of the issues were. And to your point, it was just this lack of trust, I think, that I was coming from a genuine place. And I think that was the big thing for mine. So in that first, I think from your point, Sam, you were really open to knowing that we were invested. And as we've talked about, the byproduct is improved performance. But the big issue for mine was about being invested in you and your leadership team as people. And then the result will always look after itself, to trust the process. So I think for mine, it was about hoping and wanting you to be open-minded, because the first day is it was pretty full on. And I had to leave the room. And you guys left me outside for
we did too.
About 45 minutes.
I remember that actually quite well. That was good. And that's where some really good conversation was had. And generally when that happens, there's a care factor too, right? Like if there wasn't a care factor, it would happen quite quickly. And we always say, if people are withholding, having an honest conversation with their team members due to the feelings of not wanting to hurt their feelings because they care for them, we challenge that and go, well, if you're not having that conversation, you don't care for them enough. So in that instance, in our experience, I'm sitting there going, these guys care. Like, this is good. This is real good. If that went in for 5 or 6 minutes and then we said, hey, get fee, and I'm like, oh, hang on a second, we've got some deeper issues here. You know what I mean? Yeah. And your relationship at the time, Sophie, just explain. You're in Victoria, and you're explain your position, would you mind, if you don't mind, Fee, and how you operate internally in your company?
Sure. So I'm in a national role, so I'm responsible for the delivery of our employment services contracts, and we have state managers not in each state, but Sam is responsible for managing the Queensland business. Right. So essentially, she's responsible for running her state and the people in it, and has responsibility for delivering the programs, but also managing all of the things that happen in that state. Yeah. And then I have to manage through her and take overarching responsibility. So Sam is essentially, for all intents and purposes, the state manager. Yeah. And obviously there's finding that balance of having a national approach that then can be localised, because through Sam, then she has her deputies who manage the programs, and then the regional managers have local responsibility. So the model essentially to work needs to have all levels feeling empowered to make decisions. Yeah. But the big thing probably for Sam and I was making sure then that the people at those levels, that everyone is empowered, but with empowerment comes accountability and responsibility. And I think that's where there was a lack of understanding. Yeah. So I think it was kicking the can of responsibility. It felt like it kept rolling to my feet each time. Right. And so just making sure, and I think that's where the work that we've done over the last 9 to 10 months has really opened people's minds to realising that with empowerment comes responsibility and accountability. Yeah.
That's beautifully said. Well done. How often were you able to connect in person and via the phone? How often were you seeing each other in person?
This year, not at all. Hey, Sam.
Once this year.
The last time we saw each other was with you, Emil. Yeah. And then the rest of it's been over the phone.
Yeah, yeah. And prior to that, what was your cadence of actually connecting in person prior to COVID?
Probably not nearly enough, I would think. Was it, Sam?
No, I think we got together as a team about once a quarter.
Once a quarter, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And leading into the work, where was your relationship together? How are things from your perspective, Sam? How are you feeling as the state manager with your relationship with Fee as the national manager?
It was very challenged. I felt that I was unable to communicate or articulate exactly where I was sitting or feeling. So I suppose for me, what that was leading to was that I would just stop talking, because I was really struggling to get through the message of where I was sitting.
Right.
Yeah.
And Fee, where were you at?
I think it was knowing that there was a breakdown of trust. So with a breakdown of trust comes this whole not listening. Right. It's the first thing to go, I think, is just you stop listening. So even though someone might be talking, you may not be hearing anything that they're saying.
Right. Yeah. Bit of that sort of speaking Chinese and speaking German, and sort of staying in dialogue, but not really completely understanding. So, so then we started working together. We went through the kickoff day. Then everything became completely remote. We've never seen each other again since that day. So the team was underperforming. There was low trust. Sam, you weren't communicating much to Fee. Fee, you felt like you weren't listening. So there was a a miscommunication there. And then Sam, to your team, there was very sort of little of empowerment and trust. And how were they behaving in your eyes? Sounds like you were trying really hard.
Yeah.
Doing the same stuff, getting the same result. What were you seeing in the team?
I think that accountability level was lacking, that Fiona mentioned earlier. So I think definitely the accountability level was not there. And I think just not taking ownership over what was their responsibility was probably the main thing.
Right. And in turn, what were you doing to enable that?
Nothing. I was doing nothing. That's probably
Right.
the big thing. So we'd still talk about the same things, but there was just no consequences or expectations, I suppose,
Right.
that were tight enough to keep them reined into where they need to be.
Yeah, right. And so let's go to where we are now, and then we'll reverse engineer a bit and go, well, what do we do to get here? So where are we now? Where's the team and its performance now?
It's far improved. It's still got a long way to go, but it's definitely improved out of sight. And some of our key areas that were of risk 18 months ago are not as much at risk.
Right.
They've improved consistently, and I think that competitive edge that we always had is starting to return.
Very good. And so what do you do differently now as a result of the system integrated into the way you operate?
I'm really consistent with our culture code. So that culture code is locked in and has been refined. As you know, we've refined that culture code, and it's locked in. Every conversation involves the culture code. There isn't a single conversation that we have that doesn't reflect some way on what that culture code is all about. And it's funny, when you think of performance, you think it's all facts and figures, and it's probably something that I've imparted to some of my peers, but the talk's not all facts and figures. You still talk about your performance, but when you're talking about it, what you're really talking about is your leadership.
Yeah. That's wonderful. And what are some of the structures and systems that you've incorporated? What do you actually structurally do differently now?
We've got some sets scheduled, like our regular meetings that we always have, which always start with our culture connection questions. So we always start every meeting, and we've got a program call today that Kim runs, and that will start with a 1 or 2 check-in questions. So we start every single meeting in that manner. And we've got some different things broken down for different times, and we just focus on that subject for that meeting.
Oh, beautiful.
And then we have, I have what was your idea, which I stole completely, but it was, I have a monthly coffee catch up with each regional manager, and all we really talk about is what they've got going on and what their plan is what they're thinking about it and what they want to do. So it's really not any sort of influence on my part of this is what you need to do. It's more about what have you got, what's on your mind, what do you want to do about it, what are you thinking, how does that reflect on our culture code? It really is just bringing it back to their behaviours. But we haven't had a conversation this year to one of our staff, even down to our BM level, without it being about our culture code.
Yeah, that's amazing. And Fee, what have you seen as a sort of an outsider looking in a kind of funny way? What have you observed through the process for Sam and the team?
Yeah, I think it's easy when we've been talking about it, because the New South Wales team is starting, and I have to remind them that Queensland we started this back in February, and it's now November, that you can't just get to the end. That first day when we saw that breakthrough, particularly, I can still remember that thing where Sam was out of the room and came back in and then said, I'm not going to protect you anymore. I think that was the word you used, Sam. I'm not going to be, I'm not going to, because it was exhausting, as you talked about, Emil, about having the water in the buckets and the buckets just overflowing.
Yeah.
And you kind of, when things get dark, you kind of revert to old habits. And then the next thing they wanted from Sam was kind of like, okay, so we want you to come to our sites every month. And I've had to go, hang on a tick, she just said. So it was kind of like, okay, things are going to change, because it was back to this accountability piece. And then this whole building the connection, it's taken a while. It didn't, Sam and I have our fortnightly catch-ups with Kim and Leah, and it's taken a while for us because we haven't been able to just go out to dinner and have a drink and have a chat. We've had to do it in a much more structured way, which you've enabled us to do, Emil. And I think the transformation that I've seen is they seem like innocuous things, but things like we need to get something done. Queensland, everyone nationally, we've got to all get these particular modules done, and they have to be done by, the 30th of the month. And part of the Queensland Culture Code is we do it. We're not going to ask twice. We'll do it, and you won't have to worry about us. And we're not going to waste energy on going, guys, get this done. I know you don't think it's important. I know it's someone else. And there's just none of that. And I don't want to say avoidance, but it's really what it is, I think, is there's no avoidance. It's, what's on my list? I'll get this done because this is what we've agreed is part of our culture code.
That's awesome.
So it leaves all the energy, I think, then, Emil, to actually get the work done.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, that's been a consistent conversation of late is managing time versus managing energy. And we say flip it around. And the thing is, if we're constantly having to worry about a relationship, do I trust that person? It depletes our energy, our brain energy, to the point where when we actually get to our work, we're like, I'm buggered. And you haven't really done it. You don't feel like you've done anything, but you're tired. That's why, we talk a lot about, particularly Brucey talks a lot about leadership is tiring. So get your energy right, because come the end of the week, you're going to, going out for dinner, it's going to be get takeaway and chuck a movie on, like how do we conserve our energy? But if we're consistently protecting, worrying, should I say this, should I say that? What I'm also hearing is the team is starting to actually function like a team. That's my job, play your role, get it done, move on. Sort of no drama. That's wonderful. I think it's smart now to actually ask you, Sam, what are the two values that are the center point of your culture code?
Oh gosh, it's empowering.
Yep.
And trustworthy.
Yeah. So that's really great. So for those that watch this whole little video, it's just great because what you've really laced into the language is we've learned how to trust each other. And in accordance to that, we've learned how to empower decision-making, which has freed up your ability to actually do the job you need to do. So, Sam, for you, how are you tracking personally as a leader now and a team member inside of the wider team?
My motivation is much higher. It's funny that you talk about that tiring thing, because that's probably how I felt a lot of last year. Like I just felt tired all the time.
Yeah.
So definitely a lot more motivated. I think I'm definitely better at saying, no, go and do that. I need you to go and do that. Definitely that's happening a lot more. I don't find I'm working sort of ridiculous hours or anything like that, but I'm really making sure that I stick to what I think is the important things, and that's making time to have these conversations all the time. So some days that's all you're doing is talking to each of your team member about different conversations that they like. What's your conversation look like? Where's that within our culture code?
Yeah.
I think for me too is that I don't go anywhere without that culture code close by. It's in my hand. It's there side by side, ready for every conversation. So it probably is just at the front of anything that I'm talking about. And it's interesting because you're probably aware I've been looking after the disability side of New South Wales, and it's been really hard actually having a person sit in our team that's not quite up to speed on that now, because it makes me really think about that conversation I need to have with her, because I can't just fall straight back to my culture code, where everything that we talk about in Queensland is all about that culture code. Definitely confidence has returned.
Great.
I'm making decisions much quicker. The chain of communications opened much better, and just overall feeling much happier.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Fee and Sam, thank you so much. That's about all we got time for, but I really appreciate us jumping onto this call and getting that feedback. It's been wonderful to work with you both. And, it never ends. We always talk about the cultures as something that's always consistently working, its behaviors and process. As soon as you take your eye off it, we tend to get a phone call back from people saying, can you just come back in and give us a checkup? So I commend you for sticking to the process and believing in the system, Sam, and Fee, always great to work with you as well. So thanks so much for that.
Thanks, Neil.